All right, let's get into it so we're not missing out completely on the first couple of maps for Game 3.
Yeah.
All right, starting the sounder now. You are listening to Overwatch League Network, The Backcap, the podcast with insight on the Overwatch League's path to pro and contenders analysis. Here are your hosts, Emily Drunk and Ren. What is up, everyone, and welcome to Overwatch League Network, the Backcap, the podcast, really with all of the eyes over on the Tier 2 scene and Path to Pro in competitive Overwatch. Again, I am your host, Emily Drunk, and tonight is episode 11. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Ren. And Ren, we went from having a week of really not a whole lot going on to now everything kind of all happening in a matter of a couple of days, so really, we have a ton of games that we need to dive into, and quite a bit of news as that sign-in window for the Overwatch League stage period has come to a close as of today, but just want to know, how has your week been inside and outside of the game?
My week's been pretty crazy. I mean, we're just coming off a super week in Contenders here, so trying to keep up with the games, for one, has been insane, and then I've also had some other IRL stuff going on. I've been crazy busy at the university, so trying to keep up with both has been a lot. But I'm gonna do my best to not get bogged down in the specifics, and we'll get the show on the road. How about you? How have you been for this past week?
I've actually gotten a bit more game time in. Obviously, I got my new rig hooked up. I finally have my second monitor, so I'm not having to juggle 18 billion programs at once when we do our live podcast, which is always good. I've been helping, a few friends with their tilt management within the game, especially when it comes to competitive, which has been interesting because well, in the past, I'd like to say currently, in the past I was kind of known as, well, not known as, but I did a rap that we did for HND that was tonally tilted, so take that for what it is, but, I've been practicing a lot of Winston play. Which, it might be too little too late since, Brigitte is kind of the downfall of dive somewhat, but it's been a pretty good week inside and outside of the game. Obviously, there's a ton of stuff going on with the Overwatch League stage restarted today, which we'll talk a little bit about with, a couple of the happenings going on within the news. But speaking of the news, let's just go ahead and jump right into it before we get into our week 3/week 4 analysis, seeing as, we're covering so many games this week. So first up, we got some news coming out of Toronto Esports, and that is that Cruz has arrived in Toronto. So Cruz has joined the rest of Toronto Esports in Toronto. I mean, they're not ironically named, they are from Toronto. What? So all of their plays are playing locally at this point. Now, throughout Contenders, we have seen how the effect Ping has had based on what server their maps are being played on. And, the team that is losing the prior match does get to pick what server they are playing on. And, we have seen substitutions on these teams based on, whatever server they're playing on. Because, really it depends on what location you're at. Because we do have, some teams that are playing from Korea, playing on the East servers and the West servers. And, 40 to 60 ping difference is absolutely massive. But that being said, despite, dealing with ping disadvantages at times with Cruz on this roster, Toronto Esports is still one of the top teams out there. We have them sitting at 3-1. They have a 13-4-0 map record. And right now, they're sitting atop Group A in Contenders North America. So I just want to get your opinion on what sort of a difference you think this is going to make now that all of that roster is playing locally.
Honestly, the only difference that it's going to make is a positive one, just because, like you said, they're already near the top of the standings in their group anyways, so I don't know how big of an issue the ping has been for them in being able to play smoothly. across servers and stuff like that. But just having your whole team localized in a physical setting, I feel like has greater effects outside of the game. I mean, they're all there. They can hang out together and just kind of create a stronger team cohesion. So having that group and support system is probably what's going to be the best benefit for them, honestly.
Well, looking at another addition to a team, at least looking at Contenders China, we do have a former, Overwatch League player that is, since been released from his prior organization, that being the Shanghai Dragons and Undead. So, Undead was released from Shanghai back in March 29th, so pretty recently, and he had left for China in mid-March due to some personal reasons, and I'm not going to go into them. We've kind of talked about them on our other podcasts at times, and it is very TMZ-esque, being undead and whatnot. But at the time, this was a second departure from the Shanghai Dragons, because, they did drop their controversial head coach at the time, which was U4. Since then, they had their miraculous youngster coach stepping in, RUI, and, he's with the team now in LA. But Undead has joined the LGE squad, that is Lingan Esports, and he will be competing with that team in Contenders China moving forward. So, he's got a new team, he's got a new ID, he did change his name, and he'll be now known as Hypnos. And, for those that haven't really been following the Overwatch League, Undead is pretty much known as a DPS player, primarily on the McCree, but he does play Tracer, Widow, Soldier 76, and Reaper. But I just want to get your thoughts on, do you think this is going to be something that's common, like maybe where kind of these OWL, I don't know if I should use the terminology of an outcast, but do you see like Contenders being kind of like where like these former Overwatch League players are going to go towards to, kind of try to like remain relevant within the scene?
It seems like a logical step for that. I don't know if it's going to be a consistent thing, just because, I mean, gosh, how do I put this? I feel like one of the biggest points here is that Undead rebranded, and we actually recently saw that with another player recently. Again, I'm not going to go into it, but the point is that rebranding always happens when something, for lack of a better term, I guess, embarrassing or not good, basically, has happened with a player. And I think that because of that, that's kind of our indication that I mean, yes, he's going back to Contenders to maybe rebuild up his cred and like try to come back to OWL someday, but I don't know what the odds of that are going to be just because of all the drama surrounding it. I mean, when XQC left the Dallas Fuel, he just straight left. He's still XQC. He went back to streaming, like that kind of thing. I think that is going to be a more consistent trajectory for these players that leave Overwatch League on not the best of terms.
Yeah, well, in XQC's case, he was a streamer first and a pro
Right.
player second. Undead, really not the same case. He was always a pro player first. I don't really even know if he streams. But, it's good that, he still has a way to, still play in a competitive scene. But really, like, the chances of him coming back to Overwatch League are pretty slim, I think, at this point. But, let's move on to another region, and we actually have a former player from Toronto Esports being acquired by Foxes. So this is going from, the NA scene over to Contenders Korea, and that player being transferred is Pumple. So Pumple, is making a return to the Foxes because he did play for Foxes from 2017 to early January of this year. And he will serve as their main tank over on the Winston. And, as a former player on this Foxes roster, do you think that's going to ease in the transition, knowing that there's already going to be some, like, pre-built synergy with the team already?
Definitely. I mean, we've seen a lot of rosters in Overwatch League and Contenders both that have had either players move as a unit, kind of a package deal kind of thing, or become reunited afterwards, after being split up for a little while. And I feel like that always kind of goes over well rather than just being thrown in with a random roster. So yeah, I definitely think that's going to make the transition a lot easier for the team.
All right. Well, kind of going to the entry level of Path to Pro. I think this is important for us to note, and that is that the Open Division Season 2 registration has opened up. So, we've seen the Path to Pro. It basically goes Open Division to basically like the trials, to Contenders, to Overwatch League. So, Open Division, this is for PC only. So, console players, I'm sorry, you guys are being left in the dust. I don't. Overguard still might be doing their Xbox and PS4 stuff. I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that. But I know they were like the main avenue in terms of the competitive scene, at least on those markets. But team registration is open until April 21st. And I checked earlier. I haven't really updated my show notes since this afternoon, but when I last checked, the U.S. division was up to 229 registered teams, and the teams can be comprised of up to 6 players, and that does not include the substitute players. You can have up to 3 substitutes. So really, you have a 9-man roster for this, and the games can be streamed by the players, but there is no main channel for Open Division coverage. It's really up to the players. They have to have like a 3-minute delay. And I know there's been a lot of talk about, maybe having some of these other players or like other casters, like maybe doing this on some of their off days. I don't think that's going to happen, but I would just love to have a more mainstay area to really be able to spectate, this like entry level type play because, we've gotten to see like more, like I'm trying to think how to describe this. We get to see more like behind the scenes stuff when it comes to the Overwatch League, but we haven't really seen it like trickle down so much into Contenders and Open Division, and I want to see that kind of be the case throughout each different tier. But, for
Right.
Open Division, there's no skill rating requirement, and we saw 330 teams compete in Season 1, and I know a lot of teams out there that are, entry level or teams that are, 3,500 or whatever. We even have like a podcast crew that's been started up with some people from some other competitive Overwatch podcasts between some of our good friends. And who knows, maybe like this is something that they'll end up signing up for. I don't know. I'll have to talk to Blaze and Bob and see what exactly the plans is for that. But like, is this something that would interest you? Would like you want to just get that experience of playing in Open Division, or is this something that you're just gonna leave to the other players out there, just knowing that regardless of there being no restrictions, you might not know how well you would fare?
Oh no, I would totally be down to try my hand at it. I know for a fact I wouldn't get very far, but I mean, if you have a good group of friends that you can go at it with and is going to be positive about it, I think it's a great opportunity. Um, Unfortunately, I don't have the time right now, but maybe next season. Um, and I think that it's always important for just the industry as a whole. Like you said, there's no skill rating requirement. Like when I used to play, and I still play every now and then, World of Warcraft a lot, and sometimes they have open tournaments too where there's no minimum rating requirement and things like that. I always encourage my friends to go out and try, like, just because it's a new experience and it's a ton of fun even if you don't win. So like
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely a great opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, kind of shifting gears, we do have some Overwatch League news in regards to sign-ins that is coming out of Contenders. And, some of, well, at least one of these players we actually got to see debut tonight in the
Yeah.
Overwatch League, and that was for the Shanghai Dragons. So the Dragons did pick up Damon from Energy Esports. And as I mentioned earlier, today was the last day of that sign-in window for the Overwatch League. So Damon, as I mentioned, he played for NRG. He was with Rox Orcas and later became the team captain for Kondu Uncia. And this is a player that has really kind of like, he started from the bottom and now he's in the Overwatch League because he progressed through Apex Challengers, eventually qualified for Apex Premier. And this is a player that does main hitscan heroes, whether it's Tracer, Soldier 76, but he has flexed to that off-tank role in the past, and, he did debut tonight for the Shanghai Dragons with that new look roster, or, depending on what you want to call them, Soul Dragons, Korean Dragons, whatever, it's like half and half at this point, but they did lose their Stage 3 debut against the Dallas Fuel. This was with a score of 3-1, and we got to see Damon play a lot of Tracer. We got to see him have a Widow duel with effect, to
Yeah.
varying success. All in all, though, the Shanghai Dragons, they showed their potential today. You know, there's still a ton of communication issues with this team because it is a mixed roster now. I don't know what their shot calling is looking like because I know Kagiri is kind of being the translator right now. I don't know if it's like just a mix of English, Mandarin, and Korean, or if it's just two of the three or just one. I don't know how it's working, but all in all, you know, this was a pretty big sign-in. And without Dia in the lineup because he is still in China, they did need another DPS to step in. And, you know, Damon did have a pretty good showing overall, but really it was Otto on the DPS line that really had the best performance for the Dragons overall. But that being said, Damon does definitely bring a lot to this team, and he should be a pretty good counterpart for Dia when he does come back to the Dragons roster.
Yeah, definitely. I was really pretty pleased with how well he did earlier today. Like you said, the Widow duels, he was at least able to hold his own. It wasn't anything spectacular, but I mean, the roster overall definitely has a lot of potential. So we'll see where they go.
Well, shifting gears, there was another team that has been doing a lot of cleaning house, and you know, they've been a little bit controversial when it comes to some of the transparency that they've been doing with some of the videos kind of behind the scenes, and that is the Los Angeles Valiant. Well, they did pick up two players coming out of Contenders, and I'll be honest, when I saw this, one of them made me scratch my head, and then the other one I understood. So I'll start with the one that confused me, and that was sign in KSF from Simplicity. So KSF is a flex DPS player. He doesn't really have the LAN experience, which is probably the biggest question mark, but his hero pool is very similar to Agility's, who they have kind of like touted as their star DPS player, you know, outside of Soon. So really, these two are going to be in direct competition with one another in order to get the playtime on this team. And he's showing so far in Contenders on Simplicity has been subpar at best, I think. And then on the other hand, they have someone that's played pretty good overall, and that is Finzi. He is getting picked up from Orlis in Hungary. So the Valiant roster, at this point, barring that other roster announcement that they haven't made yet, but we do know, I'm pretty sure like it was hinted that it was one of the Fox's support players in, I think it was Need. I can't remember his other name. He was going by another ID, at least on the graphic that the Valiant sent out. But, you know, Finzi does bring a lot of flexibility to the Valiant tank line, which has seen some restructure too, because Envy did leave the team, and Super, just having turned 18, is now playing in that off-tank role. But, like, I'm just really happy overall to see a lot of these former players from Movie Star Rider and 123 getting signed to the Overwatch League, and pretty much across the board, the majority of those rosters are now in the league itself. But really, like, it's been pretty uncommon to see a team in particular pick up more than one piece in Contenders. So this is really a first for, you know, that tier 2 scene.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I think, I mean, it's great to see. It's funny because I keep thinking about how at a couple weeks ago when Contenders first started up, we were like, "Oh, how often do you think these Overwatch League teams are gonna be picking up Contenders players?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. It might simmer down like later on in the season. We'll see because you know you don't want to be messing with their rosters all the time." And it's just kept coming, and it's awesome to see like multiple players every week getting picked up to Overwatch League games just because that's what they're in Contenders for. And I mean, like you said, with the crazy restructuring that LA Valiant is doing right now, it's interesting to see that they picked up two players from Contenders at the same time, especially, like you said, the confusing one, KSF. Like, why? Especially when from their little Inside Valiant movie things, they made it clear that they're putting a lot of work into making Agilities kind of their guy, you know? So I don't get that, but it's cool to see them getting picked up, and I'm really excited to see what they bring to the team.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and jump into Contenders NA this past week at this point. So, you know, on the 28th, which was the last day we recorded, we had some NA matches that were kind of going on during recording, so we held off on talking about those matches because, you know, it was midway through the second series at that point. But this past week, we saw Mayhem Academy go up against last night's Leftovers, and Mayhem took that one 3-1. We had Toronto Esports defeating Contenders Legion 3-1, and Grizzlies defeated XL2 Academy 2-1, in which was Flowers, pretty highly touted debut. We'll talk about that in a little bit. On Sunday, April 1st, which was the start of Week 4, just a reminder, there are 5 weeks of Contenders for the group stage, so pretty close to the playoff stage for this. We had Toronto Esports sweep Grizzlies, that was 4-0. XL2 Academy defeated Mayhem Academy 3-1, and then the Contenders Legion defeated last night's leftovers 4-0. And then to round off the week on Tuesday, we had Energy Esports defeat Simplicity 3-1. Fusion University defeated Bye-Week, aka Free Win, 4-0, and then Envision Esports defeated Optic Academy 3-2. Okay, so to start things off, we got to talk about Toronto. This is a team that has been pretty much fighting neck and neck with Gladiators Legion at the top of Group A. And really, that was a statement game for Toronto, I felt like. They stood tall, securing that top spot in the group, and they tried some, really cheeky stuff in this series when they went to Horizon Lunar Colony. So basically, they came out with that pulled pork combo with the Roadhog and the Orisa on defense, but they only decided to bring out one support player, which was a Mercy, and, what did they pair with it? They opted to run Widowmaker, Junkrat, which isn't super uncommon for that map, but then they also brought out the Torbjorn. And, I have to say, I was a fan of it. We don't get to see it that often, but they pretty much gave up the high ground really quickly, so, Gladiators Legion were able to capture point A with, almost 7 minutes. It was, at least 6 minutes and 40 seconds, something like that. So they had a ton of time in the time bank to secure point B. And then what ends up happening? Toronto Esports, they had the ult disadvantage. They held off Gladiators Legion on the first few pushes, and, the ult economy at that point basically had evened out. But, they had this ability to turn around fights in the clutch, and that really propelled Toronto to get the victory in this series. And, it just comes to show, it doesn't matter how quickly you can take the first point, the snowball doesn't always happen, and for Toronto to really pull it out in the clutch like that really speaks volumes about this team. And, it's just, you gotta feel for the Gladiators, because that's another team that's been really up there, and then for them to just bang their head on the wall for almost 7 minutes, it kind of felt like a Seoul Dynasty game, because they were pretty common at doing that on Horizon especially.
Yeah, no, seeing it's really just entertaining in general to see when teams are able to put on that not full hold, obviously, because they took point A, but a really strong hold where it's just this constant flow of not bodies, but of just people being able to come out and contest the point, because it's not often, like you said, it was 7 minutes. It's not often that you can see something like that. So it's just cool. I don't know where I'm going. Sorry. Word vomit. But no, it's interesting to see, first of all, the comps that come out on, especially on Horizon. We talked about this before. The Horizon is kind of a different map in general. So seeing Toronto pull out the Torb, weird. Never seen it on Horizon before. Is actually the first time I've heard of that ever. So, and kind of get rolled over, and then being able to come back from that and then flip it on the Legion, that I think shows where they're at as a team.
Yeah, it's basically one of those strats that is pretty high risk, and really Dalton was the backbone of this, because a lot of times he would open and get 2 kills on a Tracer, and that just really opened things up for the rest of that Toronto Esports lineup. So Dalton being kind of the hard carry for the team, if he can continue that up, they could make a pretty deep run here in the playoffs for Toronto overall. But, we have seen, a slew of young talent really starting to come into their own in Contenders, and I know you wanted to talk about specifically, the development of that talent. So what exactly are you looking at when it comes to the cultivation of the talent?
Well, really, I just wanted to bring it up as a talking point in general, because it's something that I've noticed over the past few weeks watching Contenders. I mean, obviously, Contenders, I don't think there's an age limit at all. I mean, obviously, if you're 10, you're probably not that good at Overwatch, but who knows? but because of that, I mean, we've got some really young guys on these rosters, and this week I really wanted to bring it up because we saw first a showing from Zerg
Hmm.
on Fusion University on map 4, and I don't know why they switched him in. Maybe they were just like, hey, we're mopping the floor with bye week, so let's let Zerg have some fun. Um, but and then we also talked about a while ago Sharp, who's on Optic Academy. He's I think 15 or 16 as well. Zerg is 15, and these guys are like super young, but they're so skilled. And I just want to give them some recognition because that's impressive. I can't perform like that, and I like, age is not always what everyone thinks it is. But I wanted to kind of pick your brain and get your thoughts on what about the situation of these exceptionally young players in Contenders, and whether or not you think it's a not like a good thing, because obviously like they do well, but if it's a good thing to have people that are that young on the team because it allows them to have more contact with like a structured pro esports uh, organization, or if you think that it could bring some like weird dynamic into the team, especially if some of the other players are older. So I just kind of wanted to see what you thought about that whole situation.
Well, here's the thing about age when it comes to esports. Obviously with age comes maturity. Maybe not. Maybe that's not always the case, but generally that is true.
Uh,
But basically, when it comes, to cultivating young talent, it's crucial for the esports ecosystem, to cultivate that talent and develop it in order for esports to succeed in the future. Because you need to have that talent always, coming in, always development, always being able to fill in those gaps. And
yeah.
there are different areas that you need to look at. You need to look at the cooperation with these esports organizations. You need to have transparency, which has been a hot topic in the Overwatch League and probably still will be for the remainder of the season. Maybe it'll be better in season 2, I don't know, but you also have to look at efficiency, just basically just being built from the ground up. And lately, we have seen the collegiate esports really starting to grow. We've seen a ton of colleges offering scholarships. We've seen TESPA really stepping into the forefront,
Yeah.
running, Hearthstone, Overwatch tournaments, things like that. But really, like, for these young players, like, in order to get them in that type of environment, that's really when we get to see that self-improvement over time, because they get to have that one-on-one, like, coaching to really be able to hone their craft. And
Right.
just being put into that sort of environment, especially if you are playing locally with your team, just makes a world's difference for them. Now, it doesn't always pan out. Sometimes their skills on one hero in particular doesn't really translate to some of the other ones, because Zerg is someone that you brought up. He's mostly been known as a Widowmaker one trick,
Hmm.
at least on Elandris, but a very good one at that. We did get to see him play a little bit of Tracer when he did play, which was okay. But like we need to see these players really develop their hero pool. Really, like I don't think that like these systematic choices for maps when it comes to heroes is going to be something that is going to bring a lot of success over time. In the Overwatch League, like you can look at Pine. Pine was only being played for like control maps on the McCree, and it worked pretty good overall. But after a few games, like we kind of saw him like temper off. So if it's happening to him at the highest level, then you can assure yourself that it's going to happen with these younger players at the lower level. But you absolutely need to give them the environment to succeed. But really, like, it boils down to, like, are you going to put them into that situation full time, or are they going to come in as a sub? Because for the majority of the time, at least for these players that are 15, they're being the substitutes. There are other Tracer players out there that are, 16 that have been more full-time role, but, not everyone is getting the same opportunity, and those players that are in all the time are really the ones that have had the more standout moments because they get to have that exposure overall. So, I guess it really just boils down to what the organization is looking at, and just how much time one-on-one they are spending with the young talents out there, because you look at Fusion University, and that DPS lineup in itself, outside of having Zerg, is pretty strong. Outside of who are you
Hmm.
being kind of mediocre at the start in most series, but like all in all, like him and Zachary have been, standouts for the team regardless. So I don't know. There's so many ways to look at it when it comes to the young talent out there. And, we did bring up another debut, and, we have to talk about Flower because Flower brought a lot of attention to Contenders this past week. That was probably the most anticipated debut in Contenders that we've seen so far, with him playing on XL2 Academy. And, despite, World Cup being, several months ago, that Widowmaker clinic that he put on against, Team USA is still fresh on everyone's minds. So he came in, he set like a pretty high bar, especially when it came to the community expectations for Flower. And with Minkachu in the lineup, Flower was basically having to play Tracer, which is one of the weakest heroes in his expanded hero pool. And, they also have Neni on that roster, who is by far the best Tracer on that team. But really, like Flower, his key heroes are Genji and Widowmaker. And, in that match with the Grizzlies, we got to see Goliath fall multiple times. Especially, like, he failed to stay alive. He was the early pick in the majority of that series. Mingachu probably had one of his worst showings overall, but Flower just wasn't able to have the same impact because in a lot of situations, he was kind of looking at fights in a 5 versus 6 environment, and doesn't really work out if you don't have the numbers. So even strength, they did a lot better, but all in all, it was kind of a bittersweet debut for Flower, I'd say.
Yeah, honestly, there was a lot of hype around him coming in, and I wasn't super impressed. I'm not saying that's all on him. I mean, it definitely boils down to team cohesion and stuff too. But as you mentioned, I think that the thing that really kind of bit them in the butt was the comp, the not the comp of heroes, but the comp of players. I don't know, because Nene is such a good tracer, and as you mentioned, like Flowers not that hot on that role. Like, why didn't they switch out Mangachu for Nene and let Flower go at it with Nene? Like, that would have made a lot more sense to me, at least, because then you have the Genji Tracer duo. Flower can pull out the Widow, and I feel like that just would have helped out the flow of the team in general a lot better. So I don't really know what was going on there.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been a situation where they were looking at the ping differential between Nene and Mangachu and Flower, because Nene is playing from Korea, so he does have a ping disadvantage at times, which, with how crucial hitscan is in the game, that might be why they don't want to always opt him on running the Tracer if they are on a disserviceable map server, I think is basically what it boils down to at the end of the day. So that's why we got to see Mangachu paired with Flower mostly in that series.
Gotcha.
But all in all, like, Mangachu, when you look at, like, his hero pool, Flower and Nene do cover the majority of the stuff that Mangachu does play, and Mangachu just doesn't quite play to the same level as those other two DPSers. So,
Mhm.
it is questionable, yes, but, I think at the, like, what it boils down to is basically the pain. And not
Okay.
being able to put your best foot forward, I think. So, regardless, Mangachu didn't have a great showing. Hopefully, his next go around will be a little bit better. But let's go ahead and shift gears and look at what is happening over in Contenders Europe. So, going back to last Thursday, this was week 3 of week 5. We had Eagle Gaming defeat Young and Beautiful 3-2. We had Copenhagen Flames defeat Bazooka Puppies 3-1. And CIS Hope defeated Mosaic Esports 3-1. Moving on to week 4 on Sunday, we saw Copenhagen Flames defeat Mosaic Esports 3-1. CIS Hope defeated Young and Beautiful 4-0. And then Eagle Gaming swept Bazooka Puppies 4-0. And then this Monday, we saw a ton of 4 Overwatch. We saw Angry Titans 4-0 Team Singularity, Orgulous and Hungry 4-0 That's a Disband. And then we had a battle between Hurricane and Giganti, and a British Hurricane 4-0'd Giganti. Which I know, like, when I was looking at that, I'm like, I honestly have no way this one is going to go. Both of these teams have kind of been all over the place despite being heavy favorites, and then, I was kind of like, well, maybe the win's being taken out of the Hurricane, and then they just 4-0 Giganti. So, with that being said, I have no idea what the heck to expect anymore when it comes to Europe. I brought up time and time again before Contender started that Europe was really a wild card region. Like anything can and will happen in this region, and you know, I have to say, like, it's pretty much been the case. It's like one week a team is hot, next week they're cold, and there's just been so many inconsistencies outside of like maybe one or two teams out there. But, one of the teams that you did want to spotlight was CAS Hope. So what is going on with this team that has them, kind of on the rise here, being like, I think they're the second seed overall at this point.
Uh, I feel like that's right. They're second or third for sure. But sorry. Um, what I wanted to talk about, well, for one, I mean, they won against Mosaic Esports 3-1, and part of me wasn't super surprised by that after all of the drama in Mosaic and everything like
Mm-hmm.
that. I feel like they might be a little more crippled than normal, so I'm not trying to harp on them at all for sure. I mean, they're definitely still, I commend them for putting their best foot forward and still following through with the rest of Contenders. That's awesome. But what I was super impressed about this week with CIS Hope specifically was, I might have even mentioned this on a previous show, I'm sure I have, but their level of flexibility, both in individual heroes and as a team. Because several times throughout the series, the whole team would kind of get the read on Mosaic and realize, okay, they're playing this way, which means we need to adapt our play style and our comp to match that. And someone specifically that I'll highlight on their roster that does that exceptionally well is Unfixed. I mean, he has a really huge hero pool. I know I've brought it up before. Um, but I mean, he was just able to be like, oh, I'm just going to counterpick once I realize what comp Mosaic is going for. Um, and I was just also super impressed in general with their ability to switch so seamlessly to quad tank when they pulled that out on Hanamura. They just rolled right through there. I was really fun to watch, honestly. They were attacking on Hanamura, took point A in like no time at all, and then just rode the momentum through point B. Usually when you do see quad tank on Hanamura A, like you see teams that will try to just roll into point B and then they'll kind of back out and reset and go to a different comp for point B, just because it's not as compatible with quad tank in general. But they just went straight through and were like, we're quad tanking, we're on the point, it's ours, bye. So I think just the adaptability and the coordination between the team is something that I just wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of triple tank come out from them, and the series that they had this week was really a stomp. We actually got to see the return of Torbjorn on Numbani work on the defense, which is really great. But when you look at this team, like you can look at their like win rates, and across every single game mode, they post at least a 75% win rate over the past month, which is just incredible. I know
Yeah.
Control, Escort, and Assault are all sitting at 75%. On Hybrid, they're sitting at 88%. So, you factor all of that in and just seeing the flexibility, like, what really surprises me is just the fact that they are as flexible as they are despite only having a six-man roster. Because we've seen teams that have, 10 to 12 players just not being able to have this expanded hero pool work to the same extent as SAS Hope. So that's really been, like, the biggest, like, ace up their sleeve for
Mhm.
me. So I'm expecting them to have a pretty good showing here when we do get into the playoffs after week 5. But there is another playoff team that I feel like we do need to talk about, and that is Eagle Gaming. So, are Eagle Gaming the real deal? So, this is a team that early on neither of us really picked as a top contender in Europe. They didn't do so hot in the Pitch Championship. They had very mild success there, but it does seem like they learned a lot with that experience. And that's not to take anything away from these other teams because, as we have mentioned multiple times, Europe is probably the most closest contested region in Contenders, just given like how much fluctuation there is in the stand-ins and everything. And right now, Eagle Gaming are the only remaining undefeated team in Contenders Europe. They have a really good shot at securing that top seed in the playoffs, and they have a very good shot at doing that because in order to go 5-0 in the group stage, they just have to get past Mosaic Esports
Hmm.
because that is their last opponent, and we have seen Mosaic Esports and all of the internal issues and just how they've been struggling. And I know chances are Eagle Gaming is going to be looking at a 5-0. They'll get the top seed for the playoffs. And I do want to highlight someone because this is something that we don't get to see very often, and that is Little Bo. He is a former StarCraft pro player. And I think that has been the only case going from StarCraft to Overwatch to make a successful transition, at least as a player. You know, Huck,
Right.
who is the Boston Uprising coach or manager, I think. You know, he was a former pro as well, but you know, he's a coach. He didn't really play Overwatch. But for Little Bo, like going from one pro scene to another, at least one that's in a very different genre too, is another
Right.
thing in itself. But Eagle Gaming has been another one of those teams that has been pulling out a lot of the quad tank, which you know we'll kind of talk about here in a minute. But quad tank as a whole has had some very interesting results overall. The results have been varying in regards to the success across the scene. But you know we have seen it more prominent in Europe overall. But do you think that Eagle Gaming, given you know their current lineup not being like their strength of schedule for them hasn't been as strong as some of the other teams out there, they've had an easier ride to the record that they have. Do you think this team is a real deal? Like, is this a playoff contender or like a championship contender at that?
I mean, I think that they've, like you said, they've all but cemented their spot in the playoffs, and I think that they'll be able to make a strong showing there. But at the same time, I mean, Orglis and Hungary has been on a tear lately. The Hurricane, Giganti, I mean, Giganti got 4-0'd, but they're still a big player. So whether or not they'll be able to contend with those other teams is really a big question mark for me. I feel like it's possible, but honestly it could go either way, and that's like you said what we've been saying about EU this whole time is that it's really any player's game.
All right. Well, you know, speaking of quad tank, you know, we've been kind of asking ourselves that one question: do we love it or do we hate it? So, Ren, I gotta know, where do you sit with the quad tank? Is this something that you like to see? Do you not like it? Are you just happy to see something that isn't dive 99% of the time?
I and i love it, and you hit the nail right on the head there. I love it because it's not dive. I love watching dive. I love the complexity. I love the precision that it takes, but sometimes you just got to juggernaut it. And seeing these big comps roll in, they're all bunched up in this big group, hefty health pools and stuff. It's just fun. It's a fun change, and I appreciate the change in pace. You know, it can get a little redundant, especially when you run it on 4 maps in a row. Eagle Gaming, um, but I mean, they showed it was super effective, you know. So as the casters kept saying that day, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I think it's an interesting cop to say the least, just because it focuses less on precision and more just on pure endurance. I mean, you're just trying to like ram your head into your opponent until the respawns end up not working out for them, basically. So it's nice. I don't think that it will ever be like the true meta, like something that teams run all the time. Although we have seen a lot of teams rely on it lately. Eagle Gaming, Angry Titans pulled it out. CIS Hope too. I mentioned they pulled it out too. So it's something that I like, but I definitely wouldn't want to see it 100% of the time like we see dive most of the time now. At least dive is more complex and interesting to watch. So it's nice in small doses, I guess. But those are my thoughts. What are yours? I definitely want to know, because I feel like it gets bashed as like a low skill comp sometimes, and some people will find fault with that. So what do you think?
Well, I'll be honest. I am not a fan of it. With one caveat. I love seeing quad tank, you know, that meat heavy attack when it comes to securing the first point on Horizon Lunar Colony. Because for
Hmm.
one, that map at times is absolutely unbearable, and at least quad tank offers more of a snowball opportunity as opposed to some of the other like the other compositions that we have seen. That being said, quad tank can absolutely not be the go-to strat. We have seen, you know, some teams out there by week aka free win. Try to bring it out. That's been what they've been sticking with. It has not worked.
Yeah.
Eco Gaming, they've faced easier teams, I would say. It's worked out really well for them, but against some of the higher teams, it's probably not going to work. And
Hmm.
here's the thing with Quad Tank. It is very easy to halt the momentum of Quad Tank. And, we've seen these upcoming PTR changes that are going to be Hidden Reaper, and it'll kind of make dealing with that Quad Tank a lot easier moving forward. But it's just
Yeah.
really easy to kind of counteract it with either, a Tracer or a Junkrat because you're able to hit those meaty bodies a lot easier. So, you build those pulse bombs, you will build those rip tires really quickly, and it's just very reliant on one support player in particular, that being Moira, because it all boils
Hmm.
down to the position of your Moira and whether or not your Moira is able to stay alive. Because as long as you're alive, you're able to build that quick coalescence. You can get your Kamehameha, and you'll be good to go. But if the Moira isn't able to be kept alive, that pretty much just goes out the window. The strategy falls apart. But what I want to talk about is this kind of like brings me back a little bit in the Europe scene because this is not the first time that we have seen tank heavy team competitions coming out in this region because if you want to go back like a year and a half ago, it was Ninjas in Pajamas that brought the triple tank, and really they were the ones at the forefront of this kind of meta. And, we've seen it kind of evolve over time. We've gone from triple tank to now quad tank and having the Moira and just being able to basically, spray yellow showers on everyone with her left click and all
Ugh.
that good stuff. But really, like, we haven't really seen this on the NA side. It's mostly been on EU. So
Mhm.
I like the fact that there is a distinct difference between different regions, but all in all, like I don't like it being kind of the mainstay strat that a lot of these teams are running. I don't think there's as much depth to that strategy as opposed to, straight dive or just dive variations overall.
Yeah. No, and I think part of the reason that I like Quad Tank in general is because Moira gets pulled out and gets to perform just crazy stuff with her ults and that whole charge rate issue there, especially being able to just heal up all those chunky targets. As a support player, I like seeing Moira come out. I love playing her, and I feel like I would like Quad Tank less if she got pulled out on more other comps, just because I like seeing her played too. So that probably has something to do with it. But as far as the nuances of regional quote unquote metas, I guess I don't know if we would call a Quad Tank a meta, but whatever. Um, Coming out, I like seeing, like you said, I like seeing the differences across regions because it shows that just each group of teams is developing their own kind of skill set. So I think that's cool.
All right, well, this will lead into, a daily thing we do, well, weekly thing, and that is to nominate a player of the week. So, Ren, I want to know, like, who do you want to spotlight this week as your player of the week, whether it is NA or EU? Who's the standout for you?
Crazy. It's out there this time. It's an EU player. What?
What?
Finally. Okay. So my player of the week is Super Pluke from Eagle Gaming. Um, we were just talking about them. They were running tanks the whole time, and out of all of the tanks in the shining sea of thick skin and heavy armor, he stood out to me. He had some really strong earth shatters, and I think it was just good to see him applying those in ways that his team could capitalize on. So I just wanted to give him the little badge of honor this week. But player of the week, what about you?
All right, well, I am going back to the States, looking at NA, specifically within the Fusion University, and I gotta show some love to another Zenyatta player. That
Mm,
being Alarm. So, okay,
yes.
Fusion University is one of those teams that at times has flashes of brilliance, and at other times completely baffles me. I mean, we kind of talked about that in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of depends on how far into the series they are. Sometimes they do get a 4-0. It does happen. But on the back line, Alarm has been an absolute beast and a force to be reckoned with. We saw just how bloodthirsty his Zenyatta has been. Probably, top or maybe top two at the very least, in Contenders. And in that series against Bye Week, I can't tell you how many times he opened up the team fight with a 2 kill. And Bye Week just had no answer. Like, they would try to flank him, and then he would just shut them down. It was just,
Yeah.
it's the greatest thing to see, and I love seeing that play. Now, when those Zenyatta changes do affect his rate of fire with the alternate fire, might not be seeing as many 2Ks, but I absolutely love seeing just the aggression coming out of Zenyatta players, channeling their inner Jonak. So Alarm is my pick this week, and really, like, it was a hard pick this week because we had a lot of standout performances, but I would say Alarm definitely one of the standouts overall for me. But that being said, we are getting closer to the playoffs. We have one more week, so we'll get a better idea of what the playoff picture will be looking like very soon. So I'm looking forward to seeing what transpires with that. But for now, guys, we're going ahead and going to close out the show for tonight. So if you would like to help out the show, guys, one of the best ways to do that is to just, give us a review over on iTunes or your podcasting app of choice. Any sort of feedback is always welcomed, just because that will offer us some insight on how we can make for a better listening experience for you. Now, doesn't matter what show, whether it is our flagship show, Overwatch League Network, or the Backcap. Obviously, we have similar formats, but we do cover different scenes overall. Just let us know what you like, what you don't like, and, we can make tweaks when necessary, or if we feel like we need to. But Ren, why don't you let everyone know where they can get a hold of the podcast over on the social medias and email and all of that good stuff?
Yeah, if you guys want to email the show, you can do so at owlnshow@gmail.com. We are also on Twitch at twitch.tv/OWLN show. We stream all of our shows, so that's where we are right now. If you're hanging out in chat, thank you. We did hit Twitch affiliate last week. Finally. You can support our show by subscribing to our Twitch channel. What is that?
Switch?
Our Twitch channel.
You could switch to Twitch.
Yeah, and unlock our network emoticon. So thank you again to everyone who's been watching the shows live. Having you guys out there cheering us on really helps us out. If you want to catch us live, we're on 3 nights a week. We have Overwatch League Network, the flagship show, on Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. OWLN, the Backcap, this show, on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific. And Heroes Never Die, the Overwatch variety show, on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. We also have a great Discord community going over at discord.me/OWLN show. And we are also on YouTube. Just search for the Overwatch League Network. We're very close to our custom URL. So if you could help us out by subscribing to the channel, we'd really appreciate that. All of our podcast episodes, top plays, and other videos can be found over there. Sorry. Totem, why don't you go ahead and let people know where they can find you?
Well, before I do that, I do want to say that we do have another game night coming up. We do these monthly. We're only doing them one Saturday a month for now. That might change going forward. I don't know yet. I got to talk to the other co-hosts about that. But our next game night will be held on Saturday, April 21st. That will be at 7 p.m. Pacific time. So, another friendly night of community competitive games, and all those games will be streamed live over on this channel over at twitch.tv/OWLN show. And who knows, maybe I might do some casting on that one as well. But if you would like to get a hold of myself, Totally Drunk, you can find me over on Twitter. That is at Little Blue Bird. You can find me generally trolling other Overwatch podcasters, talking scary movies, or just not being very happy with the Soul Dynasty. At Totally Drunk CTR. I do have a Twitch, but it is basically a ghost town. It is looking for activity like Bye Week is looking for a win. So if I am live, you can find me live on this channel most days that we're actually podcasting. But yeah, that's where you can get a hold of me.
Awesome. Bye week. The actual bye week. Anywho, if you guys want to find me, Ren, out on the interwebs, I am on Twitter at Primal Ren. That's Ren with 2 N's. I'm also on Twitch at twitch.tv/Primal Ren. I haven't been streaming a ton lately, but I am getting back into the swing of it, mostly streaming some Heroes of the Storm, some other random things. So we'll see. Swing by there. You might catch me.
Alright, guys, well, that is going to do it for us again here tonight on OWLN, the Back Cap. Again, this has been episode 11. I am Totally Drunk, and that is Ren, and we will see you guys back here, hopefully tomorrow, for Heroes Never Die, which is going to have a ton of information because we do have some event stuff that just dropped. Mostly today, we got, a pretty good preview of that during the Overwatch League. But for now, that will do it for us, and we will see you guys back here tomorrow, and if not then, next week. Guys, have a good night. Thank you for listening to Overwatch League Network, the Back Cap. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at OWLN Show, engage with the community on Discord at discord.me/OWLN Show, and join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday night over on Twitch at twitch.tv/OWLN Show.